When you initially purchase your shared ownership property, you are likely to purchase a relatively small share, such as 25 or 35%. Within your lease will be an option to purchase further shares in the property in the future. This is known as staircasing. The majority of leases will enable you to purchase further shares up to 100%, although some properties in what are known as protected areas for planning purposes restrict future staircasing to an 80% level. This is designed to ensure that affordable housing provision continues in certain parts of the country. Your lease will set out the procedure for staircasing, and each lease has slightly different terms, but broadly the procedure is the same. You will need to approach the housing association to notify them of your intention to staircase, and a valuer will then be instructed to value the property so that the price of the additional share can be calculated. Some leases restrict the amount that can be purchased at any one time. For example, minimum 10 and maximum 25%. And some leases will state that there can only be a certain number of staircasing transactions, the final one taking you to 100% ownership. Each time you staircase, the amount of rent you pay to the housing association under the terms of your lease will be reduced accordingly. If, for example, you increase your ownership from 25 to 50%, then your rent will reduce from being paid on the remaining 75% to being paid on the remaining 50%, which the housing association retains. If you are staircasing to below 100% ownership, then a document called a Memorandum of Staircasing will be signed by both the housing association and you as the leaseholder, which states the date on which a further share was purchased, the price paid, and the amount of rent payable from that date. If you staircase to 100% ownership, then the terms of your lease may state that you are entitled to request a transfer of the housing association's freehold or head leasehold title. This does not apply in all cases, but particularly in cases involving a house rather than a flat, means you would become the freehold owner of the property rather than a shared ownership leaseholder. The majority of shared ownership leases will include provisions that continue to apply after final staircasing in relation to your ability to sell the property in the future. There may, for example, be a provision that for 21 years after your final staircasing, you still need to offer the property back to the housing association before you can sell it on the open market. This is designed to keep the property as an affordable unit for as long as possible. Where you take a freehold transfer following final staircasing, the same provision may be added to the transfer deed. On completion of final staircasing, there may be some restrictions in your shared ownership lease that cease to apply. It is often the case, for example, that you cannot sublet the property during your ownership, but it can be possible to sublet following completion of final staircasing, if the provisions of your lease confirm that the restriction will fall away at that point. To fund your purchase of an additional share, you may decide to use your existing lender, or you may choose to redeem your current mortgage and take out a new mortgage for the larger amount from another lender. Which option you choose will make the procedure slightly different, from your solicitor's point of view, as they will also be acting for your lender. You should not, though, notice a great difference between those two options, with the exception of it probably taking a little longer for a new lender to release a mortgage offer compared with a lender already familiar with the property and you as a borrower. Under the current rules, if you purchase a further share, taking you over 80% total ownership, then you will be assessed for stamp duty at that point. The original tenant under the lease, which may be you, will have had an option to elect to pay duty on the full market value of the property when they purchased their initial share. You or they may have chosen to do so if, for example, the value of the property at the time was £200,000, and you or they had the benefit of the first-time buyer stamp duty holiday in place a few years ago. If this election was made, then there will not be further duty payable when staircasing above 80% ownership, as it will have already been paid or declared in respect of the full market value. If an election was not made, then there is likely to be stamp duty liability when exceeding the 80% threshold. The calculation process is relatively complex, and your solicitor will be able to advise you of your likely stamp duty liability when contacted to discuss your intention to staircase.